Elijah Carter walked into Oak Ridge Middle School every day feeling like a shadow that could never fully escape the weight of other people's expectations. He was a 13-year-old African-American boy in a sea of faces, many of them unfamiliar or indifferent. His brown eyes, full of curiosity and wisdom beyond his years, often landed on the people around him. He would study their interactions, their laughter, and their ease. It felt like everyone had a place, a purpose. Except him. There were days Elijah felt small. Days when the weight of being different pressed down on his chest. But there were other days, rare days, when he felt like he could break through. When he could speak his mind, challenge what he didn't like, and maybe even change the way people saw him. But those days never seemed to last long. School was a battleground, not because of grades or assignments, but because of the social landscape. Elijah was no stranger to being teased, mocked, or dismissed. His classmates often called him names, trying to fit him into a box that made them feel better about themselves. His skin, his hair, his speech, they were all targets. The way they talked, the way they sneered, made him feel like an outsider in a world that didn't seem built for him. It had started small. At first, it was just whispers behind his back, snickers when he wasn't looking. But soon, those whispers became louder, more targeted. Every day at lunch, Elijah would walk into the cafeteria, head down, and look for the safest corner. He didn't want to make waves. He didn't want to give them any more reason to make fun of him. But one day, things took a turn. As Elijah walked into the cafeteria, he saw a group of boys near the middle table. They were always there, the popular group, the ones who held the power at school. And today, as Elijah made his way through the lunch line, he could feel their eyes on him. It was like they were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Hey, look who's here," Marcus, the leader of the group, said with a smirk. He was the one who always led the insults. "It's the quiet boy. You lost or just trying to find a place to belong." The group erupted in laughter. Elijah froze, feeling his heart rate pick up. He could feel the sting of their words before they even hit him. But he didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing him hurt. His grip on his tray tightened. Another boy, Jake, added, "You really think you can sit here with us? You don't even talk to anyone. What, you too good for us?" The laughter grew louder. Elijah wanted to disappear. He wanted to blend into the wall. But there was something inside him, a small, quiet voice, that told him not to back down. It was a voice he hadn't listened to often enough. A voice that had always been drowned out by the fear of rejection. He lifted his head, and his eyes locked onto Marcus. His voice was calm but steady, a sharp contrast to the growing tension. "You can say whatever you want, Marcus. But you don't know me. You don't know anything about me." For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The boys paused, their laughter fading. They hadn't expected Elijah to stand up to them. They didn't expect a response. They thought they had already won. "Who do you think you are?" Marcus sneered, stepping closer. "You really think you're better than us?" Elijah's palms were sweaty, but his resolve was firm. He had heard it all before: monkey, freak, weirdo. But today he was not going to let those words define him. Not today. "No," Elijah replied, his voice growing stronger. "I don't think I'm better. But I'm not going to let you keep putting me down to make yourself feel better. I don't have to fit into your idea of what's cool or what's acceptable. I'm not playing that game." For a few seconds, the cafeteria seemed frozen. The students around them, the teachers at the front, the conversations in the background, all of it seemed distant. Elijah could hear only his heartbeat, pounding in his chest, steady and strong. Marcus looked around at his friends, unsure how to respond. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. He had always been in control, always had the power to make people shrink in front of him. But Elijah wasn't shrinking. Elijah was standing tall. "What's your problem, Carter?" Marcus asked, his voice now tinged with uncertainty. Elijah didn't back down. He didn't flinch. "I'm tired of being your punching bag. I'm tired of being someone you use to feel better about yourselves. And I don't need to be a part of your group. I'm good enough on my own." The words hung in the air, a challenge that Marcus and his friends hadn't expected. They stood there, unsure of what to do with a boy who had refused to cower. "Well, whatever," Marcus muttered, finally breaking the silence. He turned to his friends, signaling them to walk away. "You're still a freak, Carter. But whatever." And with that, they left. Elijah stood there, his heart racing, his hands trembling. But in the pit of his stomach, there was a feeling he hadn't had in a long time. Pride. He had stood up for himself. The days that followed were quieter, though not without their challenges. The bullying didn't stop overnight, but something had shifted. Marcus and his group of friends didn't know how to handle Elijah anymore. They could no longer control him with their words. They could no longer make him feel small. Over the next few weeks, something strange began to happen. People started to look at Elijah differently. At first, it was just a few glances, a few whispers of admiration. But it grew. More and more people started to recognize the strength Elijah had shown in the cafeteria. They had seen how he stood up for himself, how he refused to let the bullies break him. One afternoon, as Elijah was sitting alone at lunch, Maya, a quiet girl from his science class, approached him. She had always kept to herself, but something about Elijah's bravery had drawn her in. "Hey," Maya said, her voice soft but sincere. "I just wanted to say that what you did the other day, it was really brave. I don't think I could have done that." Elijah looked up, surprised. He hadn't expected anyone to notice, let alone speak up. "Really? I thought I was just trying not to look weak." Maya smiled, sitting down across from him. "It wasn't about weakness. It was about standing up for yourself, even when no one else would. People notice strength like that, even if they don't always show it." Elijah's heart swelled. He had been so caught up in trying to survive, trying to get through each day, that he hadn't realized how much his actions were affecting those around him. From that day on, Elijah's confidence began to grow. He started speaking up in class, asking questions, contributing to discussions. The quiet boy who used to sit at the back of the room was now a presence that couldn't be ignored. People started to see him for who he was, not the labels that others had given him, but Elijah Carter, a boy who had the courage to stand up for himself and for what was right. A few weeks later, Marcus approached him again. This time, his demeanor was different, softer, more hesitant. "Hey, Elijah," Marcus said, his eyes avoiding Elijah's for a moment. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you. I've been thinking about it, and I realized I was just being a jerk." Elijah was taken aback. This wasn't what he had expected. But he didn't hold any ill will. He had already forgiven Marcus, not for him, but for himself. "It's okay," Elijah said, giving him a small nod. "I'm not mad anymore. But just so you know, I don't need your apology to feel good about myself. I'm good." Marcus smiled awkwardly before walking away. Elijah watched him go, feeling a sense of closure. He had done it. He had faced his fear, stood up for himself, and emerged stronger. That night, as Elijah lay in bed, he realized something important. The bullies had never had the power to break him. They had only made him stronger. He didn't need to change who he was to fit in. He didn't need anyone's approval. He had everything he needed inside him to succeed. And from that day forward, Elijah walked through life with a new sense of purpose. He knew that no matter what came his way, he would always rise above. Elijah's life seemed to change after that fateful day in the cafeteria. He wasn't the same boy who had walked into Oak Ridge Middle School filled with uncertainty. Every morning now, when he stepped out of his house and onto the bus, something in his stride felt different. It wasn't just the weight of the backpack he carried or the hum of the school day waiting ahead. It was the weight of new possibilities. One day after school, Elijah found himself walking to the local park. The air was crisp, the sky painted with hues of orange and purple as the sun began to set. He needed space to think, to reflect on how far he had come. As he wandered through the park, lost in his thoughts, he came across a small group of younger kids huddled by the playground. He knew them. They were the ones who had been watching him from the edges, unsure of how to approach him. They were younger than him, maybe in 4th or 5th grade, but he had seen them in the hallways, those same uncertain looks in their eyes. Elijah didn't know why he felt drawn to them, but he did. He remembered how he had once felt, small, invisible, and afraid. He approached the group, his heart racing but his steps steady. "Hey," Elijah called softly, standing a few feet away from them. They looked up at him with curiosity. "You all okay?" The kids didn't answer immediately. They exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of Elijah. After a long pause, one of the boys, a shy-looking kid named Darnell, finally spoke up. We saw you stand up to Marcus the other day. That was really cool. We were wondering how you did it, Darnell said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elijah felt a wave of warmth in his chest. He hadn't realized his actions had made such an impression, especially on those younger than him. He kneeled down, so he was at eye level with Darnell and the others. It wasn't easy, Elijah said, smiling gently, but it was worth it. I didn't want to let them make me feel small anymore. And you shouldn't either. One of the girls, a quiet but curious girl named Tamara, spoke up. But what if they just keep making fun of us? What if they never stop? Elijah thought about this for a moment. He could tell she was genuinely scared, just like he had been before. He paused before answering. They might keep making fun of you, he said slowly. But it doesn't have to hurt you. It's just their words. People like that, they want you to think they have power over you. But the real power is in how you react. You can choose not to let them control you. The kids looked at each other, considering what Elijah had said. He could see the seed of courage starting to grow in their eyes, and it made him feel proud. I'm not saying it's easy, Elijah continued, but every time they try to bring you down, you stand taller. That's how you win. You take their words and use them as fuel, not as chains. Darnell looked up at him, his eyes wide. You really think we can do that? Elijah smiled and stood up. I know you can. You just have to believe in yourself. As Elijah walked away, he could hear them talking, their voices more confident than when he had arrived. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing he had passed on the strength he had worked so hard to discover. It was like planting a seed of hope in others, giving them the tools to fight their own battles. Life wasn't perfect for Elijah. Even though he had found strength in himself, the world still threw challenges his way. There were still the occasional jabs from classmates, some of the same old insults, some new ones. But this time, Elijah didn't let them stick. He had learned to move forward with resilience, to let the negative comments bounce off him like rain on an umbrella. One day, as he was walking down the hallway after lunch, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. He turned and saw Marcus standing by his locker, this time without the usual smug grin. There was something different in his posture. He seemed hesitant, almost vulnerable. Elijah, Marcus said, his voice quieter than usual. I need to talk to you. Elijah paused, his heart skipping a beat. He hadn't expected this. After their last encounter, he thought they'd never speak again. But here was Marcus, looking almost like a different person. What is it? Elijah asked, still cautious but open. Marcus took a deep breath. I'm sorry for everything I said before. For the way I treated you. I didn't realize it back then, but you were right. I've been a bully, and I don't know why I thought it was okay to act that way. Elijah stood there, processing the apology. It was genuine. He could feel it. And it was a moment of growth not just for Marcus, but for Elijah too. Thanks, Marcus, Elijah said after a beat. It takes a lot of courage to admit when you're wrong. I appreciate it. For a moment, Marcus seemed to struggle with his emotions, but then he nodded and gave a small, uncertain smile. Yeah, well, I guess I'll see you around, Carter. As Marcus walked away, Elijah felt a rush of relief. For once, he wasn't just the target of bullying. He had stood up for himself, but now he had also witnessed someone else break free from their own cycle of hurtful behavior. It wasn't the resolution he had expected, but it was better than any victory he could have imagined. Weeks turned into months, and Elijah continued to grow. He found himself more engaged in class discussions, helping others who were struggling, and using his voice in ways he never thought possible. His friendship with Maya deepened, and he began to feel like he had a group of people around him who truly understood him. Not just people who tolerated him, but people who respected him for who he was. One day, after a long week of exams, Elijah sat down with Maya in a library. They were working on a project together, and the conversation eventually turned to their lives outside of school. Do you ever think about how far you've come? Maya asked, glancing up from the textbook. I mean, think about where you were a year ago, and where you are now. Elijah leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. I think about it all the time. It's crazy. Sometimes I still feel like that scared kid who didn't know what to say or how to fit in. But now it's like I finally found my place. Not because of anyone else, but because I stopped trying to be something I'm not. Maya nodded, smiling. Yeah, you've really grown into yourself. You're different now. I'm still me, Elijah said with a grin. But the me I am now is someone who's not afraid to speak up, someone who knows his worth. And in that moment, Elijah realized that the journey he had taken wasn't just about standing up to bullies. It was about finding himself, about learning that the power to shape his life had always been within him. As Elijah walked out of the library, a sense of calm washed over him. He had faced so many obstacles, bullying, loneliness, doubt, but with every challenge, he had grown stronger. And though there would always be more challenges ahead, he now knew that he was ready for them. No longer a scared boy hiding in the shadows, Elijah was ready to face whatever the world threw his way. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving.